And so we come to the ExploreData tab. Assuming that you've defined the scope of your analysis on the Intro and Scope tab, the coastal definition on the What is Coastal tab, have chosen a classification on the Classifications tab, although this isn't actually essential for all parts of the ExploreData functionality, then you can move on to have a look at the data that we have in the Caesar portal. So there's a vast array already of data sets in here. We recognise that we need to introduce a search function, but for the present we have to look for data through this hierarchy of data category, data subcategory, and then the variable itself. And then if that variable is available at more than one geography, then we choose it down here. We will introduce a search function shortly. However, let's take accessibility, connectedness. Let's go for the composite index, which is the access to healthy assets and hazards score, or quite well known score. It's only available at LSOA level, so we will plot it. Now, to start off with, it's just going to plot the coastal fringe for the area as you've defined it in the Intro and Scope tab. You can tab the toggle button here to have a look at all areas, and you'll get the map of all areas. Now I'm taking this quite large area just to illustrate that the Caesar portal is relatively efficient even at this sort of scale, although you wouldn't want to go too much bigger. Because there isn't a great deal of variation here, in fact the continuous scale isn't very effective, so let's have a look at the equal count scale approach to visualizing the data. This puts the data into buckets and is sometimes a bit better at illustrating differences when there isn't a great deal of variation in that sense. As with all of these data sets, you can zoom into the area of interest, Bristol. You can pan it to wherever you're interested in, that's the extra area, or you can select the full screen view to have a look at the whole area, which is quite useful for when you're covering an area like this. And there's the button to take you back to the local view. Now there are quite a few options here. As I said, you can switch between the continuous scale and the equal count scale, but there are other options in terms of how you display the coastal non-coastal comparison across here. Now, being a coastal focused data portal, we are always interested in how coastal areas compare with non-coastal areas, and you can look at it as a violin come box plot, or you can have a look at the jitter plot, which is another way of getting some illustration of how the points, which in this case represent LSOAs, compare between the two areas, the coastal region and the non-coastal region, as you have defined it. Worth saying that every data set will have metadata associated with it, which is particularly important for less obvious variables like the access to healthy assets and hazard score. There will be a description, there will be where we got the data from, and sometimes there will be some further information about other research reports or whatever that will give you further information. It's always quite important. But the great thing here is that it gives you fairly quick and ready access to whichever data sets you might be interested in. So employment, job opportunities, there's only one category, subcategory here, only one variable, and it's only available for LSOA. So let's have a plot of that. And as this is access to jobs score, you won't be surprised that it's got a very anti-coastal sort of distribution once it finally comes up. And once again, if we press on the metadata button, we will get more information about the nature of the variable that we're looking at, including where it's come from and any additional information that might be accessible online. The colour scheme in this, as with all our maps, is that the darker colour implies generally greater policy challenges. This isn't always applicable, but where it is, the darker colour is meant to imply that in this case the job access score was lower in these areas here, as you can see in the coastal jitter plot there. Now if you have produced a classification, then you can have a look to see where these individual areas, the LSOAs, each of these dots is an LSOA, in each of the 10 deciles of the IMD, 1 being the most deprived, 10 being the least deprived, and you can see what the job access score is there. So you get a sort of pattern where the less deprived the LSOAs associated with each of these points here, the less deprived has a higher job access score, a better access to jobs, although there's no causal link implied, but this is the pattern and the association that you get. Now you can download, if we go back to the map for a second, where's the show map? If we can go to the show map, you can download a PNG image of the map if you so wish, and you can include that in reports, edit it therein. You can download the data set that you've collected. But there is one important final consideration, and that's the fact that the data that is available here depends upon how you have defined the coastal fringe, and this all comes back to the very irritating way in which small area data is currently available for 2011 geographies, 2021 geographies, for MSOAs, output areas, LSOAs and all the rest of it. The 2011 and 2021 geographies are not compatible in many parts of the country, and so if you have back here defined your areas in terms of 2021, then when you come to have a look at the ExploreData, it's only 2021 data that's available. Had you defined it in terms of 2011 data, 2011 classification, and I'll do it very quickly, define the fringe, slightly different pattern, similar obviously, but slightly different. If you go to the ExploreData, you will go, let's just have a look at the first one which I find, which is the IMD, overall score, 2011, there's not available for any other geography here, you can plot it, but that's the data that will now be available, only 2011. Now this is really frustrating, it's a consequence of the way in which data is made available for small areas, and it does mean that you need to be careful if you are looking for particular data sets to check first which geographies that data is likely to be available for, and you can download the lists of the data we have as Excel files or as Word files and get that information before you proceed there. Alternatively, as I'll have mentioned in the first video, you can have a look at the tab there and you'll get the information here, so you can look for whatever you like and it will say which geography. A frustration, but there's nothing much we can do about it for the time being anyway. Okay.